In today's video, I grind some plastic. I mix some primer with unicorn tears. I clean up some seams. I sand my ass off. I scribe some lines back. I scribe some more lines back. I check paint viscosity. I airbrush various shades of black. And I very satisfyingly remove some masking tape. How's it everyone? It's Gordon from Keto Model Works and welcome to my slightly crazy channel. And today I will be completing the Hobbyboss 1/700th scale Typhoon class submarine. The largest submarine ever built that included its own swimming pool for all the comrades. As a child, I was always impressed with these tubes of sealed air that could just disappear under the water and then pop up thousands of miles away again. The coolest looking submarine for me has always been the Typhoon class subs of the Russian Navy. I think it's due to their fin or sail location being so far back on the hull. It just makes it look like it's supposed to go really fast. This is my first submarine model ever. So let's get into it and see how this boat comes out. What was interesting to me was that the kit comes with building instructions printed on the box. I think the last time I saw that I was 6 years old and building my first, I think, Otaki Zero. Yeah, that was a long time ago when I was still young and sexy. Now I'm only sexy. The hull comes in a upper and lower part that has rather large locating tabs on the inside. The kit also has a small decal sheet. There is also a small sprue that includes the fin or sail parts. A small pre-printed stand is also included. Of course, mostly being an aircraft builder, I did not realize that, yeah, this submarine will need a stand. The hull parts fit together well, but it was immediately evident that there was going to be some work required to get rid of the seam and also the slight overlap in some places. I mean, come on, this is not a Tamiya kit after all. So let's get on with the construction. I started with the only part that need to be inserted into the hull before you glue them closed, i.e. the diving planes. This is a very tight fit, by the way. The actual part required just a slight cleanup to fit quite snugly into the hull. There are two parts for the diving planes, one for the extended planes and then one for the retracted planes. It's up to you how you want to configure your Typhoon. I went with the extended diving planes, as you can see. Then it was time to put the hull parts together and start work on cleaning up the sea. Note, I did dry fit the hull and adjusted it multiple times, but there was always going to be an overlap somewhere, and my goal was to make that overlap as short as possible. I then glued the hull parts together with some Mr. Hobby Cement S. I like this glue slightly more than the Tamiya equivalent, not so much because of the actual glue or glue performance, but because the Mr. Hobby applicator carries more glue in its applicator brush. Simple as that. Seeing that it carries so much more glue, there is of course a higher risk of making a boo-boo, and guess what? That is exactly what happened. Some glue oozed out the rear part, and just to add some more fun to the situation, I promptly put a finger in the glue, which then left the required fingerprint in the melted plastic. But of course, the simple fix to this is to add more glue and essentially just wipe it up with the excess glue. The fin had an annoying little plastic nub at the back that I removed and then ground down with my new tool, the brand that no Westerner can pronounce correctly. Dispia, whatever. The tool works great, and at the end of the day, that's all that matters. The fin fits onto the hull with no issues or gaps. The various aerials, masts and periscopes is a two-part affair, with the first part not fitting well and needing some unpronounceable grinder attention. to get it to fit. The second part also requires some dry fitting and some more cleanup to get it to fit correctly. The directional and propulsion gear fits quite good with just normal cleanup required. The only pain in the ass are the two propellers and the associated ring fairings or fenestrons that will pose a bit of a painting challenge later on. The fit of the ring fairings onto the hull does not have a positive connection at all and requires some, let's say, finagling to get them to fit. Eventually. Luckily, the horizontal rudders do actually have a positive fit, and they located it right into their positions with no required finagling. And there is the Typhoon, ready for the paint shop. I decided to use Mr. Hobby's 1500 white primer for two reasons. One was to blatantly cheat with the white line that's around the hull, and the other was to allow for some tonal variation with all the black shades I was planning on using for the top part of the hull. Also, the hull red color was going to need some post shading, and the white primer would definitely help with that. The primer was thinned with Mr. Leveling Thinner, also known as Unicorn Tears, to around a 60% thinner and a 40% primer ratio. Airbrushing commenced at about 12 psi with various light coats of the primer. In my experience, and if you listen to most of the experts online that does regular airbrushing, it's much better to do multiple light coats instead of one heavy coat. As any good primer is supposed to do, it showed me all the problems I was going to have to deal with. In this case, it just proved to me that the seam I mentioned earlier was going to be a challenge. So it took a lot of sanding and some more sanding and some more sanding to eventually get rid of this pesky seam that Hobbyboss decided to put right in the middle of this submarine. I mean, it would have been much easier to put that seam where some of those tiles were running, but I guess that's asking too much. There are smaller areas such as the horizontal rudders that also needed some sanding attention, and these Infini sanding sticks is the bomb. Absolutely highly recommended sanding sponges or sanding sticks. The next step was to start with rescribing the lost lines from all that sanding. I started it off with some HIQ parts transparent scribing tape. I then started scribing the lines back with the trumpeter scribing tool first. Here you will be able to see how inconveniently located that, let's just say, seam is. Of course, it wasn't just the horizontal lines that needed to be rescribed. For the vertical rescribing, I was using the Tamiya scribing tool. Coincidentally, the next scriber I used was actually a Russian product. It's the All Models scribing tool, and I used that for some more intensive, deeper scribing. After which I used the trumpeter scriber to clean up some of the lines. Okay, after another coat of white primer, it was time to mask off the white hull line that runs around the hull, and some PMA 2mm masking tape was a great fit for this line. Also, using a silicone tipped color shaper to burnish down the tape is a great method to assure no paint bleed through. The PMA tape is very flexible, but it still took quite the effort to get the curves lined up around the hull. Unfortunately, and by the way, this tape isn't available for sale anymore. Well, it's not as might be available somewhere else, but from my regular supplier, it's not available anymore. With some final finagling of the 2mm tape, the boat was ready to go into the paint shop. I was going to go a bit ballistic with the shades of black I was planning on using, but at the end of the day, I only used two colors, namely Tamiya NATO Black and Tamiya Rubber Black. Note, as I mentioned in my Uhu build series, black on model kits is never really black. Both Tamiya Rubber and NATO Black are actually very dark grays. Using my usual ratio of about 60% thinner to 40% paint, I started to airbrush light coats of rubber black first, using my Harder and Steenbeck Infinity airbrush at around 10 to 12 psi. I also intentionally used the short vertical strokes to simulate the slight color nuances between the tiles on the sub. Strictly speaking, weathering has already commenced. This also does not have to be applied super neat, because if you go look at the reference pictures of any of these submarines, the tonal variation is very random. This is still Tamiya Rubber Black, and the only thing that I'm doing here is to add more layers of paint in certain areas to darken that specific area. Now, using Tamiya NATO Black, I used the same vertical short stroke method to add the tonal variation of the dark grays. It's very easy to overdo this, so I try to systematically build up the layers to avoid overdoing the effect. Being subtle is key, and not to rush this is also key. This is most likely the 5th or 6th layer of the NATO black that I'm applying in specific areas on the model. And there you have it, the supposedly black paint has been completed. The next step was to, of course, mask off the area that was going to be painted the whole red color. I just used some Tamiya masking tape to accomplish this. For some reason, I just love masking, and it's most likely because of the fact that if you know you're masking something correctly, you have something to look forward to when you remove all the masking. It's like a little secret that's waiting for you to open it up right at the end. Damn, that is so satisfying. Of course, this is the most satisfying demasking of the project. Oh, just look at that. I get chills looking at that. And there you have it. The majority of painting is complete. Some cleaning up of the torpedo tubes was required. I did some hand painting on the aerials, masts, and periscopes. Next was decaling, and the kit comes with a small amount of decals, especially if you're not going to use the white line decal like I did. And there was no real issues with the decal settling down. Just a little bit of warm water and Bob's your uncle. I decided to use the Tamiya panel line accent color, the regular gray, for all the panel lining and subtle weathering on the hull. After wiping off most of the Tamiya panel liner, it was time to seal everything in with a clear coat. In this instance, I used Mr. Color 181, which is the semi-gloss super clear.